Hello, athletes, parents, and coaches. For this week's Sportlight Podcast, we decided to go back to one from the past, but reframe it a little bit. With the end of the fall season coming, the Sportlight is about to turn off in many athletes' lives. And with that comes a very critical time. And if athletes do not handle that transition correctly, it could lead to devastating circumstances. Dustin and I had a chance to sit down with BYU great Max Hall, who went on and played in the NFL and eventually found himself in legal trouble and addicted to drugs. He talks about handling that spotlight, and when that spotlight begins to shut off, how do we handle it in the right way? Our discussion was so enlightening, and we thought it was timely with so many people ending fall sports right now, and for some seniors or even some juniors who may not play varsity next year, it becomes a real difficult time, and hopefully this podcast, this recording helps you to help your young person, or if you are an athlete, to handle it yourself, that turning off of the spotlight. Here's our interview with BYU quarterback and NFL quarterback, Max Hall.
Welcome to the Sportlight Podcast for parents, coaches, and athletes. The Sportlight refers to the time in an athlete's life when they have increased ability to affect the culture around them and the increased opportunity to learn life's lessons through sports. This podcast aims to help parents and coaches capitalize on their athletes' precious time in the Sportlight. The Sportlight Podcast is brought to you by Especially for Athletes program.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Sportlight Podcast. I'm Shad Martin. I'm here with my partner Dustin Smith, and we're honored to be joined by Max Hall.
It's good to be here, man. Thank you.
We're excited. There's very few people in the world that I remember the first time I heard their name, but being a big BYU fan, I was concerned. We had some down years in John Beck's first couple of years, and then he came on and had 2 great years, and Dustin and I are golfing, and I was like, John Beck's leaving, man. What's next? What's in line? And he said, I said that same thing to my buddy Brandon Doman, quarterback coach at the time, and he said, I got 2 words for you, Max Hall. We're going to be just fine.
Doman said that?
Yeah. So anyway, it didn't take long to realize that was true. And so we're honored to have you join us on the Sportlight Podcast. And Dustin, why don't you take a second to just share some things and be great.
Well, Max and I, we do a lot of work with football players, and I've coached and run a business outside of this called Quarterback Elite, and we train quarterbacks all over the country. And so Max, I was just down in Arizona actually a couple weeks ago with Max, working with quarterbacks. So for those of you that may be new to the podcast, or you haven't been following BYU football, back when Max played, Max was a high school football player in Arizona, came up and played up at BYU, had a tremendous season at BYU, is one of the all-time quarterbacks to come through BYU, and then went and played in the NFL, and actually started for his home team in Arizona for the Arizona Cardinals, and then went up, played a little bit in Canada, and if I remember right, was your first start against Drew Brees and the Saints after they had won the Super Bowl, right?
That was it. The first start. So the week before I got thrown in at halftime, right before halftime, I remember the quarterback coach coming over to me, kind of leaning in. I could tell he was listening to whoever was up in the box. Hall, you're in. And I was like, what? It was like one of those situations like, where's my helmet? So I went in there, got in the huddle. I said, okay, boys, here we go. Like, it's on. So, and then I got to start the next week versus Saints, which was intimidating, but I just had to be like, man, this is awesome. I'm going to try to soak this in. So,
We beat them, right?
We beat them. The defense played really well. I played good enough to win, but man, to get your first start, it was at home. Family, friends were there. It was a special moment.
And beating the defending Super Bowl champs.
Yeah, too. I got a great picture of me and Drew after the game, kind of doing a little half hug, and that was pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, I've through that the last several years, Max, working with you in our quarterback stuff that we do, I've gotten to know you outside of football as well, and we've had a lot of serious conversations over the years. you're familiar with the nonprofit that we run, especially for athletes, and you've been a positive voice in our cause for a lot of years. I want to talk to the parents a little bit that listen to this, and the kids that we hope listen to our podcast, about some of the dangers that come from the pressure of the spotlight. And, that's the name of our book. It's the name of this podcast. It's a key phrase in our program and in our curriculum and message. And you were at the highest levels of that spotlight. And one of the dangers that comes from that spotlight is the pressure of failing. And sometimes that pressure to fail and that desire to not fail can lead to some things, in some cases, things like drug abuse, and it can ruin kids. And I want to talk a little bit about that, because you have some experience, and
sure,
you've been a voice for good for a lot of people in that. Talk to us a little bit and share your story with us.
Yeah, I'd love to. I kind of want to start with BYU and how I got there, because I went to Arizona State right out of high school. My uncle Danny White, my grandpa Wizard White, their names are up there, and wasn't really a BYU fan growing up, ASU guy, but I went there for a semester. It wasn't a great environment for me. And the first time I was ever introduced to like drugs, or it was mainly Percocet. A lot of my friends were doing it. And back then it was a pill. Yeah. I mean, you take a pill. It wasn't like cocaine or anything like that. It was safe, just, right? Yeah, it seemed safe. And dabbled with it at ASU, dabbled with it, but it was more of a recreational on the weekend type thing. Went on my mission. And when I got back, I had a very serious conversation with my dad, because my dad knew what was going on at ASU. So I was able to clean up, first of all. I kind of cleaned up some. My bishop went out. But when I got back, he goes, Max, what are you going to do? You're going to go back into that environment and be part of that? And is that the direction you want your life to go? Or are we going to take it in a different direction? So it's kind of funny. I actually had made the decision that I was done playing football.
Oh, really?
I was done playing football. I know. Isn't that crazy? Yeah. And so I was going to go to MCC, take some classes, get a job, and move on. 2 weeks after I got home from my mission, I get a call from Paul Tidwell, who was the head recruiter, and he was the running back coach at the time. Max, we heard you're home. We still got a scholarship for you. And I was blown away. I was like, this is crazy. Went up to a visit, sat in one of the team firesides before the game, looked at my dad, and he goes, you're supposed to be here. And so I was very blessed and lucky to be at BYU. And when I was at BYU, there's definitely that spotlight, man. When you're the quarterback at BYU, it's not only the community in the state. I mean, you're representing a faith, and all the LDS people around the country and world kind of know who you are. Everywhere the team travels, there's BYU fans everywhere. Yeah. So that's a big spotlight. And I kind of mentioned this story. When I was a kid, I was a huge Suns fan. And my favorite player was, and I'm going to put him on blast a little bit, but KJ Johnson. He was my favorite player. And I remember my Uncle Danny was the coach for the Rattlers at the time. So we would go down to the arena and the Suns would be practicing while the Rattlers were. So I'd get to go to some of the practices. And after practice, KJ would sprint to the locker room. I could never get him. I try to go up to him. He would ignore me, go. So after one of the practices, Charles Barkley's hanging around. And he sees me and my cousin, and he brings us over. I'm playing one-on-one with Charles Barkley. We're goofing around. He's having fun. And he spent the time with us. And I thought that was the coolest thing in the world, that he was willing, because of who he was, and we idolized him, to spend some time with us. So I said, when I was at BYU, I remember that story. I wanted to be like Charles Barkley. I wanted to take the time to really use it to speak to youth, to spend extra time with people, to try to be a good example to everybody, to anybody who I was around. And I did my best. And so I had a great experience at BYU on and off the field, and the different people that I met and experiences that I had was just awesome. So I was lucky enough to go play in the NFL. I remember draft day, getting calls from different teams. We're going to take you in the 5th. We're going to take you in the 6th, and then just nothing. So I didn't get drafted. I had the option to go to Arizona, Cincinnati, or Tampa Bay. and I decided to go back home to the Arizona Cardinals and wanted to play in front of the hometown. So we talked a little bit about the story when I got the start versus the Saints, but this is kind of where, for me, I started running into some issues, because during that game, right before halftime, there was a play where right on the goal line, it was a pass play. I dropped back. I ended up scrambling to my left, and I got to like the 2-yard line, right? And how I am, I'm not going to slide. I'm not going to go down. So here I am at the 1-yard line. I'm going to lower my head and try to get in, and I just get blasted by 2 guys, and I get knocked out cold. Now, I've had a lot of concussions and stuff, but I've never been knocked out like on the field like that. So I remember kind of opening my eyes. Larry Fitzgerald had picked me up, and he's like shaking me. Hey, are you okay? Are you okay? And I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. I said, what happened? He goes, don't worry, we scored. So I thought, I got in, right? I made it. No, I fumbled, and the left tackle picked it up in the end zone. That's how we scored. And I remember the next day at film, everybody making fun of me. But but that concussion was tough, because back then the NFL concussion protocol wasn't around.
Yeah.
So I just said, I'm good. I finished the game, and the next week we were going up to Seattle, and I remember being in practice just hazy. And I remember in the game versus Seattle, I would forget the play at the line of scrimmage and have to ask the running back what the play was.
But you weren't going to go and tell a coach that, because this is your shot.
Exactly. And that's never been who it's always been. I'm tough. I'm mentally strong. I can get through this. So I wasn't going to tell anybody. I was going to tell them I was fine. But the coaches should have seen how I was in practice and noticed that. So anyway, I kept playing. In the Seattle game, I took a hit in the backside, knocked out again. They started me the next week. And then it's so funny. I threw an interception. It was versus Tampa Bay, and they yanked me. And I'm thinking, now you pull me out? Yeah. After everything that I've been through, I throw an interception, and it wasn't even my fault. And now they yanked me out. So that was really hard. So that kind of put me, I got a concussion. They yanked me. I didn't get to start the next week. So I'm kind of depressed about the whole thing. Finally, I think it was 3 weeks later, they put me back in against the Rams. And I'm kind of stepping up in the pocket. I get sacked. Ball kind of slips out. I remember reaching out with my left hand, and one of the Rams defenders basically speared my shoulder and dislocated my shoulder. I remember it hanging down there, and I'm like looking at the sideline like, hey, my shoulder's out right now. So the trainer came over, yanked it back into place. And I remember he took me back to the locker room. So I'm not in a good place to begin with. I got a dislocated shoulder, and I thought my career was done. Yeah. I remember saying to the trainer, I'm like, it's over. It's done. And, he was trying to console me, but so I was out the rest of the year. I didn't get surgery on my shoulder, but I was able to go see a doctor, and I was prescribed Percocet. And I was familiar with Percocet. I had dabbled with it in the past, and I remember, hey, this stuff makes me feel pretty good. And what it did is it numbs out anything else that's going on around you. So I would take this stuff. Not only would it relieve the pain, it would relieve the emotional and mental pain that I had from my career being over. So I started taking more and more because I just wanted to numb everything out. Problem is, when he was able to give me one more prescription, and when that prescription was out, I was pretty much addicted to this stuff already. And so now I had to find it other places. I had to call, and being in Arizona, I knew people. I knew the friends that did it in high school, so I had access to people that I could call and get it. So now I'm getting this stuff off the street. And this is where the cycle really started to go for me. Now, I'm not going to blame my decision in drug use on my shoulder or the concussion, but I made the decision to numb things out. And so here we go. It gets worse and worse and worse. I'm introduced to other drugs that I'm using. I'm introduced to cocaine, and I start spiraling out of control. And it got to where I was not only mentally, but physically addicted to the stuff. I couldn't stop taking it because I would be in withdrawal. So here I am, just went from being in a great Sportlight at BYU and using that for good. Now what am I doing? I'm a drug addict, and it's a big secret. I'm keeping it from everybody. My wife finds out eventually. I convince her to keep it a secret, my parents, because I don't want it to ruin my reputation, right? So now I got this big secret that I'm dealing with. I'm depressed. I'm using drugs, and it just got worse. And that went on for 4 or 5 years until finally I was arrested. So there was one morning where I did a whole bunch of cocaine and took a whole bunch of pills, and I'm wandering around in a Best Buy acting like an idiot. They call the cops. They show up. I had a little bit of cocaine left on me, and so they arrest me. That was on a Saturday. Monday was a holiday, so it came out to the public on a Tuesday. And at that time, and this is years down the road. So this is I've been struggling this for a while. I did go up to the CFL and play a little bit. I was put on a drug called Suboxone, which kind of helped with the withdrawal and just kind of kept me functional. So I got back from the CFL. I'm coaching for Gilbert High School, and I stopped taking the stuff. I start relapsing again, and here we go. Now I'm arrested. So 4 or 5 years ago, I'm the starting quarterback for the Arizona Cardinals. I just got done with a great career at BYU. Now I'm in the back of a cop car, and I'm handcuffed. And so this Sportlight now is not a good thing for me because of my decisions and my actions. And so now it's all over the news. And man, I never thought in my life that I would be in that position. If you'd have told me 10 years ago that one day I was going to be a drug addict and get arrested, I'd been like, you're crazy. That's not me. I come from a great family. I had a great upbringing. I was a hard worker. I was mentally tough. But this was a different animal. And addiction doesn't care who you are. It doesn't care where you come from. And so that was hard to deal with. And it was the lowest point of my life, sitting there thinking my secret's out. It's over. Everybody's going to know. No one's going to want anything to do with me anymore. So that was very, very tough for me to have to deal with that and be in that position where I was. So I've been from one extreme in this thing to the other. And so, and then the depression and everything that goes along with that is really bad. So that's my story in a nutshell. I was able to get over it. I ended up going to rehab, but still for the next couple of years, I'm dealing with anxiety and depression and trying to figure out life without drugs. And so I was so bad for you. That was probably the hardest year out of all of it, is trying to get sober and get into recovery and get my life back on track. So, eventually I had an opportunity to coach again, which I loved. And I did the things that I was supposed to do with counseling and therapy and all that stuff. And I was able to get back on track. And hopefully now as a coach, I can use my story. I can use my experiences to mentor and help others, and now use the Sportlight to my benefit again. So that's kind of it in a nutshell right there.
Mm-hmm. Well, I've heard you share the story several times now, and every time you say it, I want to just tell you how proud I am of you.
Thanks.
And all of us. And I know I've seen your recovery. I've watched the road. Like I said, I know you as Max Hall, the football player, but I know you more as Max Hall, the man. And so I'm proud of you. You know, I had you speak, Max, at one of our camps that we did and tell your story. And I believe it was the first time you publicly told it in Utah, or I know KSL, Jeremiah Jensen at KSL sat down after and did an interview with you on it. And I know that was a hard thing for you, but you said something in that to those boys. And ironically, for the parents listening, and you and I have talked about this, we had a couple boys that didn't sign up for the camp and wrote me emails disappointed in me that I had you coming as one of our coaches. How dare I bring somebody who was a drug addict and who had been arrested to coach? And I was pretty taken back by that and got into a little bit of a back and forth with a couple dads about how that's the exact reason we need to have people who have had life experiences working with our boys to talk to them, because drugs will affect everybody. But you said something to the boys that to this day is probably, Max, and we've coached, a lot of kids. I've worked with thousands of athletes. To this day, it's one of the more powerful things I've ever heard I remember you telling the kids that football is not their identity. Yeah. You talked about you're a football player and that's all you think you are. And then when something threatens that, you'll do whatever necessary to remain the football player. And in the wake behind you is family and friends and reputation and other things get cut off or destroyed. Tell us a little bit more about that, because that was a real powerful thing you told the boys.
Yeah, and it's so true. And I really do believe, I said football is what I do. It's not who I am. Yeah. But at the same time, it is a part of who I am because of the passion I have for and work for. But the biggest thing, it's not the most important part of who I am. Yeah, I was a football player. I was a pretty good football player. And I bought into that so much to where I forgot about the other side of me. Like the church and family and everything like that was still important, but this was more important at the time. Football was the most important thing. That's what I was known for. And when you get recognition and kind of fame from it, it naturally becomes who you are and you live in that. And so when that is taken away, is everything else in your life in check to where you can be okay? If that's taken away,
it's almost a drug in itself.
Right? Oh, I was addicted to football,
to the fame, to the attention,
everything about it. Yeah. And it's hard not to be when the media is talking about you. You're doing interviews everywhere you go. People want to talk to you and autographs. Sure. And how do you? That's really hard. It was really easy for me to forget the other part of really who I was, because this was cool. You know. Yeah. This spotlight was where I wanted to be. It is. There's an adrenaline to it. There's endorphins release. That is for sure. I was addicted to it. I was addicted to the game planning, to the playing the game, to off the field stuff. So take that all away, I was depressed. And I didn't know how to deal with that, because it had been what I did for so long that I didn't want to be anything else. Yeah, I wanted to be in that. So that was a huge part. And so when I told that to the kids, I hope you have everything else in check, that you can be okay. Because all these kids that are playing high school, how many of them are really going to go on and play? Even in college, how many of those guys are going to go on? It's going to end one day. And are you going to be ready for that to end? And are you confident enough and have enough self-worth to where you're going to be okay with being Max Hall, the dad, the husband, whatever, the coach, the mentor, and not Max Hall, the football player in the spotlight all the time?
I'm wondering, we had this discussion today that right now, high school's ending, and a lot of most athletes, even really good high school athletes, their spotlight's just about to flip out, flip off like a light switch,
Yeah.
And from your experience, if you could go back and, sometimes we tell the kids, hey, you need to get everything in check, right? Mm-hmm. You need to have, what would you tell yourself? How do you do that? If you could go back and take yourself and be look, dude, first day you walk into Arizona and say to the Cardinals there, what would you tell yourself? How would you help yourself prepare for that?
That's really hard to do. But it all comes back to me from self-worth. Is my self-worth bigger than just I'm a football player? But who am I as a person? Where is my spirituality at? What are my true values and beliefs? And it can't just be a sport, because it's going to, and it's really hard for kids. We didn't have Twitter. We didn't have all this stuff back then, but now these kids are looking at Twitter. Oh, blessed to receive an offer from here. Blessed for this. So excited. And I'm sitting, as a kid, I'm like, well, I don't have any offers yet. Yeah. So what does that do? Yeah. When these guys are posting it, and it's all over, and I was at this camp, and thank you, coach, and I'm not getting this. And I have kids right now in my high school that are just and the problem is some of them, I know they're not going to get an offer. They're not good enough, but they think they should because everybody else is and they see it. So when they don't, man, I see it. I see it go down because in today's world, in social media, everybody's saying, oh man, you're so awesome. Congratulations. They start to believe all this crap. All these good things that people are saying, they believe it. That's who they are. And now if they don't get that anymore, it's depressing for them. Yeah. It is super depressing because people's self-worth is based on what other people post or what they say on social media, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, and parents, like that's a big, we've talked about that in some other podcasts we've done that, I'm thinking from a parent's perspective, sometimes we cause like, we're ones shining this bright spotlight. And then all of a sudden, you mentioned this in another podcast, it's like, boom, but the light switch goes off and it's like to younger brother, to younger sister, and all of a sudden these kids, and I think there's a lesson in that for us to be careful with that, even if our kid is a Max Hall, going on to do these incredible things, compliment the right things in their life and make sure that that those things that we're paying attention to are the things that matter and last, not just outcomes and achievements in sports and stuff like that.
It's so true. And I see parents, especially dads, who are living through their kids and almost enjoy it more than the kid. And so I see some kids who end up hating their parents or their dad because they're putting all this pressure on them. They're paying for them to get trainers and personal, these coaches and going to camps, and they just drive them. And the kids, some of them are just like, they get sick of it. And now they see maybe they're not getting the recognition they want. They got dad all over them saying they need to be better, shopping them around to different coaches, taking them to different high schools. And so the parents have to be very careful. I was blessed, and I'm gonna kind of give props to my dad. My dad did a really good job with me. He tried to teach me that being a man of God was more important than being, a really good football player. And he promised me that if I did these things, I'd be blessed on the football field and academics and things like that. So I was taught that, but still it became, if you get to that level, it's really hard. So parents do have to be careful. And what are you teaching your kids, and what are the values that you really want them to have? And their worth cannot be athletics.
Well, parents out there that are involved in sports at the level that they're involved in it now, which is intense. I think more than ever need to be aware of these lessons that you share, Max, and because it's the making the identity of the athlete, the cheerleader, the volleyball player, the football player is easier to do now more than ever because of social media. And as parents, we really need to look ourselves in the mirror and ask ourselves before we do a post of our child, is this post for me? Yeah. And my compliments for my followers, is this post going to add undue and unnecessary pressure on my son? I think if we were to do that, our son or daughter, I think if we were to do that most of the time, we'd probably say, maybe I shouldn't even post this, right? Or be careful with how I post it, or make sure my son and daughter know that their real worth is in the work ethic they're putting into this and how they're treating other people, and are they coachable, and are they a teammate? And my guess is that in the kids that you work with and see that would be something that you would you'd advocate for more of.
Absolutely, because athletics is so awesome as far as the lessons that it can teach you, the hard work, integrity, being a good teammate, showing up on time, you know what I mean, being a team player. There's so many good lessons with it. And if we focus, and that's why high school has always been a pure form of the sport. It's getting worse, though. You know, the college and NFL atmosphere is starting to come down to where it becomes more of a business. And how am I going to get my kid a scholarship? You know, as opposed to, hey, you know, I want you to be a good teammate, a good friend. I want you to be good in the community. Let's do service. Let's use this. Let's use this Sportlight to do some good. Yeah. And you know, if you're just harping on what your kid's doing in the sport and not focusing on the values of it, then you're doing it wrong. And even for me, I mean, before we started this thing, I was showing you videos of Rex. Rex, right? I'm already a proud dad. He's playing a flag football game right now. And I'm already, as a dad, thinking how awesome that is. So even for me, I'm trying to take my own advice right here. Yeah. Am I teaching my son Rex the right things? And yeah, that's great. And you can do that. But I also want you to be a great person. I want you to be, my dad used to always say, I want you to be a man of God, because that's the most important thing. Because in life, like I said, sports are going to end, and you're going to have to move on to taking care of a family and being a good example to your kids. So,
as we've gone around and spoken and thought, I have my own children, and they're involved in these things and competing in it. It's almost like I have this check on myself that if I want them to accomplish to like post, I kind of have the wrong mindset, right? Like I should want them sometimes even to experience failure. Like if I'm looking at sports the right way and I see them lose, I see them be disappointed. I see them, our daughters are drill girls, pull out of a dance. If we're looking at sports the right way, it's almost like we could say, I'm glad they're experiencing that. Yeah. I want them to, I'm more interested in them learning the lesson that's going to come from this than posting like, oh, my daughter, da, 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 or my son, da, da, da. Mm-hmm. And that looking, like keeping my eyes open as I watch my kids participate in stuff and looking for opportunities to teach them really important lessons, but also like capitalizing on even failure. Mm-hmm. Like, hey man, I'm glad that you just experienced this. Life's going to be worse than this.
Yes.
Like this is high school drill. It feels like everything right now.
Yes.
But please learn how to deal with these things, because you're going to have them your whole life, and you mentioned your dad and how he did this great job, and it doesn't prevent our kids from having struggles, but I bet it instilled that in order to get up and get back to life when you could have continued to spiral. I bet that played a huge role in that, those lessons he taught you.
It did. And man, I fell hard a few times. And some of the lessons that he taught me were invaluable. And even when I was going through that, he was there for me and supported me and was willing to help. And that was a big deal. And kind of going back to the posting, it's okay to post stuff once in a while. Sure. Hey, you can be proud of your kid. Yeah, that's not what we're saying. Right. Go ahead and post that stuff in a while. But I love what you said about the failure. And I have a great experience. I'm going to bring up Rex again. We had I coach his little basketball team in the winter. And we played a game where it came down. We're down by 1 point. Ball got passed to Rex. He had a shot to win the game, and he missed it. And after the game, I could see it. I could see it in him. And he was almost in tears. And I pulled him aside. I said, dude, I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud of you. And I said, that's not going to be the last time that you miss a shot or that something bad happens to you. And so if you can coach your kids through a situation like that the right way and just say, you're going to make mistakes. I'm here for you. I still love you and I'm proud of you. And guess what? It's going to happen again. So let's prepare. You're going to be okay. At the end of the day, you're going to be okay. And if you don't learn from it, then that's wrong. Let's learn from it. And maybe next time you make the shot, great. Maybe next time you miss again. How are we going to deal with that? But it's so true what you said. Sometimes the failures can be the best teaching points rather than, if you did make the shot. It was a way better, cool experience for me and him to go through that. So,
and I think that the great benefit sports provides, at least kids that are like us, that are built like us, I cared. It's unfathomable to me to think about how much I cared about an 11-year-old basketball game when I was 11 years old.
Oh, I know.
But the fact that our kids care about something so deeply gives them opportunity to experience disappointment and defeat and failure. Sports provides that maybe better than anything else can.
I agree.
To our youth. And so what a great way at this time in our world where resiliency is an issue in our world. They get a chance to fail at something they care about deeply. I mean, there's a lot of things I could care less about when I was 11, grades even. I was just there's next semester, but losing an 11-year-old basketball game, I would cry myself to sleep. And what a blessing to have something our kids care about that much, that we could teach these lessons.
I know. And it's, I mean, imagine if I'd have been like, you missed that shot because you don't practice enough. You know what I mean? Or when we get home, we're going out and we're going to, you know what I'm saying? Like I've seen dads handle it that way, almost to where they were so mad they didn't want to talk to their kid after the game because they played bad or whatever, And so I think you hit it. Athletics can be so good. And there's so many lessons that we can teach if the coach or the mentor is doing it the right way. Athletics are key. And now with the depression and the anxiety and the suicide rate that kids are having to deal with, and the bullying that I know you talk about all the time, you're passionate about it, Dustin, and helping those kids. Athletics is a great venue to help kids and to get them out of that, and to be leaders and to be service oriented and to make friends and help those around them. So we talk about this Sportlight, and I love the concept of it. And I've read the book and everything, and I share it with my kids all the time. How are they using it? And the lessons are invaluable in sports. So
thanks, man.
Yeah.
Well, awesome. I think that's a good discussion, brother. I think the takeaway items, parents, we need to make sure that we're pushing our kids to become their best and working with them, and not at all trying to, put a wet blanket on their dreams, but make sure that they understand that they're more than just an athlete, and that whether they miss the shot or make the shot, we're proud of them for taking the shot. We're proud of them, right? And for having the guts to put on the uniform and go out there. And it's not who they are, it's what they do. And we love them no matter what. But be aware of the fact that the stresses and pressure that are being placed on these kids nowadays, it's more intense than it's ever been. And we're fooling ourselves as parents if we think it might, it would never lead to my son or daughter turning to drugs or alcohol to numb it. We're fooling ourselves if we think that's going to, never happen to my kid. And we need to be aware of what our kids are doing and what they're doing to numb the pain, and who they're talking with and hanging out with, and be involved in their life. And I think that's all part of this process, so that sports becomes really what it should be for these kids. Any other takeaways that I missed that you guys can think of?
I as I've been listening, well, first of all, just thank you. But I've been thinking we could prepare our kids better for when that light turns off. And I especially have been thinking about some kids. We know some kids in our own community here, 3-sport athletes, incredible kids that, an injury, one play, and that light can turn off. And when that light turns off, just being there for them, it's inspiring to hear how your father was there for you when that light was on. He was there when that light was off. He was there when that light was pitch black in your world. And but preparing our kids for those moments and being there when that light turns off, I think that's important. It probably looks different for every kid, but to think through, to help them make that transition from even sometimes these high level, NFL and BYU quarterback, but a lot of our kids get a lot of attention for being a high school athlete. Just thinking through that. How can I help my kid? And what's their situation? I think that's valuable to think ahead to that.
Yeah, I think it's awesome. You guys, thank you for having me on. My last thought is this, kind of for the parents. I think it's important for parents nowadays to not be super strict on their kids. This is my opinion, okay? So it's not doctrine or anything, my opinion. Talk to your kids, okay? Talk to them about drugs. Talk to them about pornography. Talk to them about all these things that kids have access to. If you think your kid hasn't been exposed to this stuff already, you're nuts, because they have. And talk to them about it. They cannot be afraid to come to you and say, Dad, I was at a party, they were doing this, or hey, Dad, I drank, or you know what I mean? And say, hey, I love you. That's not what you're supposed to be doing. And if you can have a relationship with your kids to where you can have communication with it, I think that is so key. And that's what me and my wife have decided. We're going to talk to our kids about it. And my kids already know what vaping, I mean, my kid's 11 and my girl's 9. They know what vaping is. They know what drugs are. They know all this stuff, and you have to at a young age. And I feel like hopefully they would come to me if there was a situation. So parents, just have an honest and loving communication with your kids. Don't be that really strict parent, but I mean, you can still hold the values and morals and the actions that you want them to do, but the relationship is key, and they have to know that you love them no matter what they do, or, you know, what they end up being in sports. You don't care about that as much as you care about them as a person. And I think that's key. That would be kind of my last point there. Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Before we leave, we want to give Max a second to talk to us a little bit about his podcast that he's doing. And it's awesome. It's talking with people struggling with addiction. So Max, tell us about it and how people can find out about it.
Well, first of all, thank you guys for having me on. I mean, the Sportlight Podcast, you guys are doing a good thing here. The podcast that we started, it's called Agents of Recovery, and it focuses on sobriety, recovery, and addiction. We're very open and honest. Me, Brock, and Coach Blue have all been through addiction, and we've been through it. So we talk about all aspects of it, of what we went through when we were in our addiction. We talk about how parents can handle kids that are going through it, or spouses, or we cover all aspects of it. So if you know somebody, or if you're going through or having a hard time with substance abuse or any sort of addiction, it's a great podcast to get on there and listen to us. And hopefully there's some benefit you can take away from it. And I've really enjoyed doing it, and we've had a lot of good feedback. So please check it out. It's called Agents of Recovery Podcast. No longer victims of addiction.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Max. Thanks, Dustin, as always. And thank you for joining the Sportlight Podcast. Hope you'll subscribe, and we look forward to having you in the future. Eyes up, do the work.
This has been the Sportlight Podcast from Especially for Athletes, sponsored by Coca-Cola. You can learn more about Especially for Athletes by visiting the website at especiallyforathletes.org. You can also learn more about the book, The Sportlight, by Shad Martin and Dustin Smith at especiallyforathletes.org/book.